Let's take Min. Okay. Hi, Min.
Hello, Alyssa. Hello, Eve.
How are you doing?
Hey there. How are you?
I'm pretty good, thank you. How about you?
Good. We're good. We're good. We're hanging out. So do you want to explain your topic today?
Yeah, so something I would like to ask you, I think specifically for you is because I listened to one of the previous episode when the one I called discussed with you and Jimmy about the hookup culture, and it makes me think that this seems to relate to the sexual liberation movement since the 80s. So I wonder, like, I guess, like, I suppose you hold the secular humanist view, right?
Yes,
I don't know.
I think so.
I kind of, but I don't think I'm putting that whole label on it because it just depends. I have such varying opinions about each specific thing. But as far as, I guess I just need like a more specific question.
Yeah. So the reason I asked you is that I wonder, like, when under secular humanism, like, we should advocate for freedom, and that includes sexual freedom and bodily autonomy. Something I agree with that. However, I wonder, like, how far, like, we should go without fall into the downside of when you resort into, like, something like hookup, casual sex is gonna have the negative impact on people well-being. So I wonder, in that context, then, do you think that the freedom we should have limited until like the well-being is compromised?
So the problem is, I don't know how we would. I don't disagree that things, just like we were talking about adult content earlier. I think that we need education and we need people to be informed, and I want people to be empowered to make choices for themselves. And if that means having casual sex, that's great. I do want them to be educated on potential, I don't know if we want to call them consequences, on sexual health. I want them to be empowered in everything that entails, which to me would mean education and personal responsibility, all of that. My problem is, I don't know how we would put limitations on that without interfering with somebody else's bodily autonomy. So I don't believe in putting limitations on something like that, because to me that would imply some sort of legal something or another. If you mean, maybe you can clarify, maybe you mean in the messaging that we're putting out there, but I don't know that I'm hearing a lot of, and maybe I'm just living in La La Land, or maybe it's because I'm in the middle of Finland. No, I'm kidding. I'm not hearing a lot of messaging that's just like, you should just go, like, sleep with 100 people a day and nothing matters and it doesn't matter. I'm not hearing that messaging. I am hearing a lot of, like, hey, body count does not have to ultimately define anything about you. It doesn't have to have negative connotations, because it doesn't. It really, I think, is such a personal case-by-case basis. And that's why education matters. That's why, I know you said this question was more for me, but honestly, Alyssa's going to have some actual statistics for us. But I just think more than putting limitations, I would rather put more education out there. And I'd rather empower people to, maybe those that are going to casual sex instead of, like, therapy, or instead of whatever it is they need to address personally, like, helping them with that. Because people do that with all kinds of things. People go to food, people go to TV and just, shut out for a whole day. People go to all kinds of things that are totally normal and healthy and part of life, and can overuse them or use them improperly. So it's just about, I'm saying the exact same thing over and over again, so I'm going to shut up now. It's about education to me. So anyways, I would love to hear Alyssa's thoughts, though.
So all of the stuff that I consume around sexuality is all going to be very sex positive. And so I want people to have the sexual experiences that they want to have. And whether that means engaging in, hooking up with people, a variety of people as often as they want to, as many as they want to, then, and they're happy to do that and they're doing that in a safe and responsible way, then I'm happy to have them do that. If they want to have long-term relationships, or they want to have polyamorous relationships, or they want to have open relationships, like, I think one of the things that is interesting about sexuality and relationships is we've tied so much moral value to all of it, when in reality, there is no moral black and white moral value for sexuality. Like, there is nothing morally right or wrong about having sex with a person. And it's the same thing with like with sex work too. Like, there's nothing morally wrong about sex work. What we end up really taking from this is the social consequences, like the social consequences that we have for engaging in hookup culture and, finding out that this person has a body count that's higher than you expected it to be or what you want it to be. It's all these social consequences. And the reason that those consequences are primarily social is because those are the only consequences that exist. Like, there really isn't anything wrong with having a lot of partners. There's nothing wrong with having multiple partners as long as you're doing it safe and it's consensual. So I want people to be able to explore the type of connections that they want to have with other people. And we know, like, people who have had multiple partners before they're married have happier, longer marriages if they decide that that's something that they want to do later as well. So there are benefits to having multiple partners. We learn something from every partner that we have, whether it's a sexual partner or it's not. And it could even just be the thing that we learn is, this is what I don't want anymore. But it's important because we as human beings, we learn from experience a lot more than we learn from reading it, and we don't know until we try. And so it's important to allow people to explore everything that they want to explore. And there's always going to be people who are going to want to prioritize monogamous relationships. Like, that is far and away the majority of the way that we socialize around sexuality, is looking for monogamous relationships. There might be a period of time though when we're in our 20s and maybe 30s where maybe that's not the case. But human beings love to find a little tribe, for lack of a different word. I feel like that maybe that's not a PC word. I'm not sure, but I'm thinking of cavemen people. They like to find their group, and that's their little group that they stick together with. And we like that feeling of having a community and having people feel very close to us, and the feeling of being known by another person is really important to us as human beings. And so however people feel that fulfillment is, I'm happy to support them in that. But I do understand what you're saying. It is, it's challenging for sure. It's challenging to navigate.
Yeah, Alyssa, I think the thing you just brought up about the moral judgment on people who engage in something outside the heteronormativity is something. Yeah, it's that is the problematic thing. But for me, when I bring it up, it's something I refer to is the well-being of people who engage in that, and because I read a two study on the subject, and there are 4 articles written on it. And so 2 of them coming from Harvard University Department of Health, in which they say that for married people who come in a long-term monogamous relationship, they tend to have better health, better lower blood pressure, and they recover faster if they catch a illness like cancer. And they also they are less likely to engage in risky behavior. And for men, the testosterone level is is below the lethal dose, so it's better from in the long term. And another study from the National Institute of Health on LGBT people who are married, it say that people who are married in the LGBT community, they are less likely to experience distress, and they also they are less likely to have physical disability or like a physical ailment, and overall they are better off. So so I think that the problem I see, in the secular or atheistic movement, like they don't emphasize this value too much. But they accept, or I would say like celebrate the casual hookup or one night stand, etc. I don't know. That's a good thing, because when I listen to Matt about his stand about morality, it's about well-being. So should we not advocate for that instead of think that's not necessarily good for our well-being?
Well, they're also sorry, go ahead.
I think part of my issue, though, is similar to when I hear studies talking about, people that don't have sex before marriage end up staying married longer. Well, here's my problem. How healthy is that relationship? Staying married doesn't necessarily help. And so my thoughts about these studies, which I would have to go learn more about, but just right off the jump, what I'm thinking is, how many of those people that have been, that we're comparing to and saying, oh, look, these people that stayed in monogamous relationships that had less sex outside of this relationship, they have healthier lives. How many of the other people were they facing consequences because of how society treats people who have more sex or who have casual sex, or how are their doctors maybe treating them differently or not taking them seriously so much when it comes to pain or different things? How are their families treating them? What's mental health situations? I don't think we can just look at those studies point blank and say, oh, obviously this means having casual sex is less healthy for you. I do think there's other contributing factors that I'm interested in learning more about, or asking Alyssa to do that work for me. But she's probably already done it. But that's why I don't feel comfortable advocating for, either a hookup culture, which I don't even know how much I believe in, or purity culture. I feel comfortable advocating for people to make choices based off of hopefully a lot of education, and to not be shamed for whatever decisions they end up making that don't harm others. That's how I feel about it.
Yeah, and I think it's about not shaming people for whatever choices they want to make, because although those people in those marriages are reporting things that way, it's possible that they actually would also be happier had they discovered polyamory when they were in their 20s. And, we just don't know. And so I think the most important thing is for people to be able to make their own choices. And who knows, maybe there are people who are engaging in, hookup culture, and later in life they do want to get married, but this is just where they're at right now. This is like how they're wanting to arrange their relationship right now. And, there's, in the same way that there might be studies of people being married having some measures of like success, there's so many metrics to measure happiness and success and satisfaction in relationships that it's hard to get a holistic lens on that just from like a few studies. And there are studies about people in open relationships, older adults being in open relationships that are happier than ones that are in closed monogamous ones. And so, I think the important thing is to allow people to make the choice, because while for some people, monogamy is going to be what works best for them, it's just not going to work best for everybody. And the vast majority, like 99% of people, are going to end up in, as of right now, are going to end up in traditional monogamous partnered relationships. The people who are choosing to make these like sort of what feels like alternative choices for us right now, like polyamory, open relationships, hookup culture, whatever it is. That's a very small minority of people who are doing that long term. For most people, it's going to be just sort of like a moment in their life where right now that's what they need. And later down the road, maybe they'll look for that, like that more not substantial, that more whatever, traditional partnership. But something that's interesting too is that human beings were not always successful with monogamy. We have historically been a community-based species. And so monogamy is a relatively new invention for us. And so it works, I think, and the happiness that people are finding is in part, and I think this is kind of what Eve was saying too, it works, and these people are finding happiness because our entire society is built around that nuclear family structure. So they're going to have a lot of the benefits of how our society is built for that type of lifestyle. But we haven't, like, human beings as a species have not been historically monogamous throughout our time. And we just sort of invented that over time. But that hasn't always been the case. So I think the most important thing is to just allow people the choice and give people the reason for being loudly supportive of all of these choices is so that people who will be happiest in alternative relationships have the freedom and the support to be able to explore them. And they also can find information on how to do those things in a safe and careful, or not careful, I guess, thoughtful way. Yeah. But I there's something for everybody, basically.
So, Alyssa, if you don't mind, I would like to bring up just one more point with you. And if because I DM you on Instagram about the conversation you asked me about, the researcher talking about how hookup culture harm people or hurt or help people, and so I don't have the first-hand information, so I just take this as the secondary information from them because they are sex researchers, so maybe they know better things, more things than I do. So in that conversation, the one researcher said that how far we as a society have to progress towards the sexual liberation without harming women's mental health. And she pointed out that the more progressive we become, it seems like mental health of women do not become better. And one of the panelists responded saying that that we understand how evolution works on men and women a bit differently when it comes to casual sex. So we had to proceed to guarantee liberty for everybody, but we do it with caution. We don't fall into the trap that because we've had to go against nature. Therefore, we're gonna become miserable. And from my understanding, that I begin to understand why women in general tend to respond to casual sex differently from men. That they're less likely to engage in it, and they don't seem to do better compared to men. I guess because that's how they're.
Yeah, I would really have to see these studies because it's so funny. In my experience, even in my personal experience, and in a lot of my girlfriends, in casual hookups, it tends to end up being the men that seem to be more emotionally, impacted by it. I don't know. Maybe myself and my friends are rare cases, but it's been no big. I don't know. I have to see those studies because I don't know that there's actually science to women being more emotionally disturbed or however we want to phrase it by casual sex. So I'm sorry I haven't seen if you send it on Instagram, my DMs are insane, but you're welcome to try to if you send me another message tonight, I'll go look and it should hopefully come to the top. So
send it to me again too, and I'll look if you haven't sent it to me already. But I also want to be mindful that there are a lot of these like random associations that are like the Association for Family Support, whatever, and they're like specifically Christian funded research groups. And so they don't always conduct the most honest research because they're kind of like feeding into that. And I'm not saying that that's what these are from, but it's just an interesting thing to study, because I've never and I've done this like continuing education on sex and sexuality for 3 years, and I've never really heard anything about the women being more affected by that. And there actually are some interesting studies about how like the gendered brain thing can be a myth in some ways, and in other ways people find that there's big difference between the like cisgender male and female brains. But it's so interesting because I see research that supports both, and it almost feels like no matter what, someone has like a vested interest in what's going on. But yeah, send us those studies because I'm curious to see them. I think ultimately the biggest thing at the end of the day is allowing people the choice, and they can decide how they feel.
And to not shame them.
And to not shame them, because we learn from experience. And so it's the same thing about like when we were saying that if you tell someone not to think about a white elephant, they're going to think about a white elephant. If you tell people you should only sleep with your husband and that should be your primary focus is finding a husband, they're going to start to get curious about everything else. So just allow them to be curious without the shame. Allow them to explore and decide for themselves what works best for them. Because ultimately, at the end of the day, like what everyone else does in their relationship is not our business.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, that I agree with you. Yeah.
You know?
I think
so. Like,
and in terms of what you were saying about, you know, as secular humanists or whatever we may say, if our standard for morality is well-being, I still think that we can advocate for this is not the way I want to say this. We can talk about a sex positive culture and still advocate for well-being, because I'm not advocating for people to go hurt others. I'm advocating for people to do what they want to do with their sex lives, as long as they're not hurting other people's well-being. So that's where I have to draw the line around what I support and what I don't, because I can't thought police someone. I can't predict if this casual sex is going to hurt this individual or not. But we can look and see, like, okay, are they being responsible? Yeah. Are they being safe when it comes to potential STDs that would impact somebody else? You know, that's what I can advocate for, which is, like I said, education. That's so important. But at the end of the day, it is that person's choice as far as anything that's going to impact them and what they're okay with and what they can and can't handle and what they're willing to risk and find out if they can and can't handle it. So, but I, again, love this conversation. I really appreciate you, men. And yeah, maybe Alyssa and I can dive into this more on another episode. And I think it would be a really good conversation even to post for other people. Like, should we be advocating for abstinence, or maybe we'll put something like that as the title, and we'll have a whole episode about it. But thank you so much for calling.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Min.
Have a great evening.
Yeah, thank you.
Oh God,
we have,
sorry, Min. I cut him off. I didn't mean to do that. I am going to look into studies on hookup culture, and literally when I looked up study on hookup culture, because that's how I'll remember to actually look it up later. The first thing that came up is the Institute for Family Studies. I guarantee that's funded by a Christian organization. And it's confronting the toll of hookup culture, transforming hookup culture, a review of American hookups. I promise you, I can almost guarantee there's
a bias.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah.
Hello, I'm Jimmy Snow, Pokemon Master and Executive Producer on The Line. Would you like to support a specific show on The Line or The Line in general? There are special tiers on our Patreon and in our channel memberships. You can do just that. By the way, you could consider leaving a super thanks down below. You could also like, subscribe, and leave a regular comment. All of these are great. Now, I'm going to get back to crushing loneliness, but while I do that, why don't you check out one of these?